the news.
Belgium's lower house of parliament has voted to ban the wearing of the burqa in public. The Senate's approval is expected to be a formality, which would make Belgium the first European country to criminalize the full Islamic veil. The measure was overwhelmingly backed by 136 MPs with just 2 abstentions. Now the bill to ban such clothing is likely to become law in June or July. Religious studies expert Caroline Sagesser describes the measure as using a hammer to kill a fly. The proposal originally came from the centre-right Francophone party, she says, but no other party, neither Greens nor the left, dared to say we support the burqa. For the Vice President of the Executive of Belgian Muslims, the bill is a clear form of violence against citizens because it removes the notion of individual choice, she says. Some Taliban say a woman without a burqa is a woman too many. When I hear our politicians here say the same, it's like two kinds of rival extremes against women, and we have to condemn it. France, which has the largest Muslim population in Europe, is also looking towards a ban on wearing veils in public, with the government said to examine a draft bill in May. The oil slick off the US Gulf Coast has been declared of national significance amid growing concerns of an environmental disaster. The spill began a week ago when an oil rig exploded and sank, and despite containment efforts, it's expected to reach land later tomorrow.
It's horribly difficult to estimate what the flow is, but what we can see is the amount of oil on top of the water. We think that the range has increased of what the estimate has been. So I think that somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 barrels a day is probably the best estimate we have today.
News that much more oil is leaking than previously thought is adding a sense of urgency to the unprecedented cleanup and prevention operation. But as the situation has changed several times, government officials say it could be up to 3 months before a relief valve is installed to stop the leak. Now thousands of meters of boom are being deployed in a bid to contain the spread. The threat could not come at a worse time, as the oyster season ends and shrimp season is set to begin, a key sector for the Gulf Coast's fishing and tourism industries.
Greece's economic plight is no joke, but that hasn't stopped their cartoonists from having a field day lampooning all and sundry about the mess. Today, the EU's Economic and Monetary Affairs Commissioner Olli Rehn said member states and the IMF are just days away from completing talks with Athens on pumping in aid, conditional on Greece reducing its debt.
The financial support will give Greece a sufficient breathing space from the pressures of the financial markets to decisively restore the sustainability of its public finances and to put the economy back onto a path of sustainable growth.
It will be vital for Prime Minister George Papandreou to get the unions on the side, as social unrest, already simmering in opposition to austerity measures that will only get tougher, is likely to get even more strident. He met private sector union leaders today. Lenders are not only pressuring, they're blackmailing and won't even accept to negotiate. We've had a taste of a very difficult package of measures for the people, measures which are against development, measures that will cause recession. Cuts are likely to fall more on Greece's bloated public sector than in the private sector, and as that is a source of many votes for the ruling socialists, stiffened resistance there could be the kiss of death for economic reform.
Officials from the IMF, the European Union and the European Central Bank are in Athens, hoping to wrap up in the next few days what could be the biggest bailout in history. But Germany's reservations about handing over cash to what it sees as a profligate Greece could yet see the Greek economy in ruins.
Simon, how close is the Eurozone to collapse right now, or is that over-egging the pudding?
That's certainly over-egging the pudding. I think there are some legitimate doubts about the sustainability of the current membership of the Eurozone. But to talk about the Eurozone cracking or unravelling at this stage is alarmist, excessively alarmist. Some debt restructuring, rescheduling in the Greek case is inevitable. Contagion to Portugal is not just a possibility, it's already happening. And unless the markets settle down, unless the EU can take the necessary action to reassure the markets, to settle the markets down, then I think we'll see a continuing increase in risk averseness vis-à-vis Portuguese assets, and that Portugal could find itself quite easily in a similar position to Greece.
What role is being played by the ratings agencies in all this? They've put their hand into the ring yesterday and the day before by downgrading Greece, Portugal, Spain. Explain to me why a group of discredited economists in New York have such a disproportionate influence on the economies in Europe.
Banks should not have been making huge commercial decisions on the basis of the ratings produced by these agencies. I'm not convinced that replacing them with a state-sponsored EU ratings agency would be an enormous improvement. I think the potential there for it to be politically compromised is considerable. But clearly there does need to be reform of the ratings agencies, and I think the timing, as I already mentioned, the timing of yesterday's downgrades was very unhelpful.
Simon Tilford, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Portugal says it will be able to slash its 2010 public deficit to less than its original target of 8.3%. Finance Minister Fernando Teixeira dos Santos wants to make cuts earlier than planned. The move is to appease investors who fear a Portugal default on its sovereign debt after Standard & Poor's downgraded its credit rating on Tuesday.
We are going to act quickly, in an adequate form, and with an open mind of doing whatever is necessary to not only to calm the markets, but to do the work that is necessary structurally to be done in Portugal.
Prime Minister José Sócrates and the leader of the opposition have vowed to work together to tackle Portugal's fiscal woes. Part of the PM's plans to get the deficit down include hiking taxes for Portugal's highest earners, a public sector pay freeze and large-scale privatisations of state assets. That's not gone down well with trade unions, though, who plan a mass protest on May 1st.
There's no question Spain can meet its debt obligations, according to Standard & Poor's, despite its decision to downgrade the country's credit rating. Most sections of the Spanish press, however, agree the move spells doom and gloom. But not for leading businessman Antonio Brufau. The head of oil giant Repsol says, "I think we have to de-dramatize a little bit the meaning of the rating agency's qualification. Sometimes they make mistakes," he says. Sentiment shared by one of Spain's most high-profile trade unionists, who said Standard & Poor's shouldn't be encouraging financial speculators to come here and worsen our conditions. Spain's socialist government is managing to introduce some reforms to tackle its burgeoning debt, but they're far from popular. This student says she's extremely worried about finding a job at the end of her studies. "We were told the crisis was going to be short, but it's not. Things are going to be a lot harder than they were in the past," she adds. There's widespread agreement that Spain needs to reduce its labour costs to increase competitiveness, but whether the government will push ahead with its reform programmes remains to be seen, with regional elections due next month.
They've been likened to a world superpower capable of bringing down a country. But the three major credit rating agencies in New York don't use missiles nor bullets. Standard & Poor's, Moody's and Fitch can put a bomb under a nation's economy simply by changing their advice on its creditworthiness. Their opinions are supposed to help investors judge the likelihood of making a return if they lend, for instance, a country money in the form of buying bonds. And the agency's ratings carry clout in markets around the world. The influence of this group of economists in New York reaches far and wide. Earlier this week, they downgraded the creditworthiness of Spain and Portugal and told investors that Greek debt is junk. But in Germany, the finance minister played down their influence and urged against a knee-jerk reaction. Perhaps the approach we're taking is the more important one, on a European and national level, to better monitor the ratings agencies. No market participant is prevented from not taking the agencies too seriously. Today, they're taken a little too seriously. Critics also point out that before the financial crisis, they labelled toxic mortgage assets as a good buy. And the fact that they're paid by the institutions they rate has led to claims that they're about as independent as a judge who's paid by the prosecution.